Shalom! Today, we will be reading The Little Clay Pot, written by Sharman Castillo, out of the book Wow Stories, Volume 1, copyright 2007. In the beginning. Mara, have you seen my father? Jamal asked the young handmaiden, who was on her way to run an errand for the lady of the house. No, but I can only guess he is where he always is, in his shop making pots. Jamal smiled at the girl as she passed by and said, I know. I should have known. You see, Jamal's father made clay pots of all kinds for the castle. If someone wanted a good durable pot, they would always come directly to Jamal's father. Of course, there were other pot makers in the land, but no one could make pots like Jamal's father. Jamal left the corridor and went downstairs, past the servants' quarters, to a room in the far corner of the castle. Inside the room, Jamal's father was busy adding water to a big, thick lump of clay that sat in the center of the table. My father's just incredible. Jamal watched as he tore medium-sized chunks out of the big lump, making 20 medium-sized balls. So, here you are again, Jamal said. His father smiled at him and said, Yes, of course, you should have known I was here. I need to make some new pots for the kitchen. Cook has broken too, and I know that Miss Kettles needs a new pot for gathering milk when she milks the cows. So, here I am. He chuckled in good humor. You know what? You're incredible, Father. But why don't you just let Miss Kettles send away for the pots instead of being down here in this hot heat? Ah, my son, it is not as hot as you think, and I have the windows there for fresh air. Plus, the fire for burning the pots is outside in the yard. And I have been doing this so long, I could never think of giving it up. I actually enjoy making these pots. It is a part of who I am. And anyway, I will have these pots done by the end of the week. Well, if it makes you happy, then so be it. Jamal went and found himself a stool so that he could sit on to watch his father. He could remember as a little boy coming to watch his father create beautiful pots. He thought it was fascinating. As he grew older, he could not understand how his father made the time to make these pots in the first place, and yet still do all of the other things he needed to do as well. Right now, he watched as he had so many times before, as his father wet his hands to knead the clay. First, he would take a lump and place it on the spinning wheel. Then he would wet his hands ever so often. And lastly, he would take his fingers and poke a hole right at the top, forming a big circle. He would also use different types of tools to shape the mold. It was fascinating to watch a large lump become a jar, a vase, or a jug. Today, however, his father was not actually creating a specific container. He was making identical pots of the same size and same style. It took him a couple of hours, but the time seemed to pass by so quickly. When he finished, he placed the clay pots on 2 shelves against the wall, 10 on each shelf, 5 long and 2 across. He then turned to his son and motioned for him to follow. They both left the room and closed the door behind them. The clay pots. As the door closed behind Jamal and his father, the little clay pots began to awaken. Ah! Boker Tov! The littlest pot yawned. He sat on the top shelf, on row number 2, and back of pot number 5. He was pot number 10, the littlest pot.
Yes, Boker Tov.
Hey, who said that? Pot number 10 asked.
I did. Look down here on the floor, by the table on which you were made.
And so all the little pots looked down on the floor next to the table on which they were made. And there, they saw a chisel.
What's a chisel?
It was the chisel the master used when he made them. Hi, Mr. Chisel, the littlest pot said.
Wow.
Hi, little clay pot.
It talks.
I see you guessed my
Look at
name.
him.
Hello to you all. I'm happy to meet you.
What is this place? Said pot number 15.
This is where you come to be molded and remolded and chiseled and spun and painted and prepared to be given for a
Wow.
specific purpose. You are jars of clay, but one day you will serve a specific purpose. That is why you were made.
Chisel explained. What specific things are we being made for? Asked pot number 5.
Well, I know for a fact that the two of you are going into the kitchen for Cook. She needs new jars, and I know that Miss Kettles needs a new jar to gather milk.
Chisel told them all.
Well, I hope I'm not called for such a trivial job.
Pot number 2 rolled her eyes.
Trivial, silly little job.
Chisel smiled at pot number 2 and said, "That's not a good attitude to have, my dear. You see, there are no trivial jobs for you jars of clay. Each of you have roles that is vital and important to this world. So never, never belittle someone else's purpose in life."
Whatever. I know that I deserve more than someone pouring milk from a cow into me. Can you imagine? Or being in a hot kitchen all of my life.
Wow.
Pot number 2
She's
grumbled.
mean.
I don't care what I am as long as the master uses me, the littlest pot said. You know pot number 10, the one behind pot number 5?
Don't you worry, little pot. The master uses all of us.
Chisel smiled. Then Chisel heard a noise and said to all of the little pots,
Shh! I hear the master and his son returning.
So the Chisel and all of the pots closed their eyes and were quiet. The master and the pots. There were footsteps outside the door. Jamal and his father walked back into the room, and Jamal's father went over to a shelf and pulled down pot number 3, number 4, and number 5. Okay, son, I'm gonna take these 3 outside, and I'm gonna prepare them for Cook and for the milkmaid. You go over there and get the other 15, and bring some paint with you. We'll paint them outside in the yard. That way they can dry in the sun. Very well, Father. Do you need me to get Chisel as well?
Oh, yes. Ah, yes, absolutely.
So they gathered up the clay pots and Chisel, and then they left. The only 2 pots remaining were pot number 9 and pot number 10, who of course was the littlest pot.
Wow, just you and I are left. I hope we leave here soon, too.
Me too.
Pot number 9 said to the littlest pot number 10.
Me too.
Pot number 10 was a little sad because he wanted to hurry out and serve his purpose.
Oh, well, I'm gonna get some rest. You should get some too, little pot.
Okay.
So the little pots went to sleep and slept so deeply that they did not hear Master return and put Chisel back on the floor next to table. They also placed a beautiful jar on the table as well. Pot number 9 and the littlest pot were so tired that they slept the whole night away. And it wasn't until the next morning that they woke up.
Boker Tove.
Little pot exclaimed.
Boker Tove,
Said Chisel.
Who are you?
Little pot asked the beautiful jar on the table.
I am pot number 2.
what happened to you? You are so beautiful.
Exclaimed pot number 9.
You little losers. Well, unlike you two, I was chosen with the other 15 to go into the castle to decorate the dining hall. But they started to paint me this hideous color and ran out. I'm so glad to say. Anyhow, I suppose they are here to right the wrong they did to me. I wish they would hurry up. I hate this shop. It's hot.
Pot number 2 rolled her eyes. That's not a good attitude to have, pot number 2. You should be happy to have this opportunity to shine. You shouldn't complain so much. It's wrong,
Can you imagine?
Chisel
little
told pot
Chisel.
number 2.
Telling me. Who are you to tell me what to do? You're nothing more than a chisel. A tool. And we have nothing in common. Why do you keep talking to me? Stop it. Now chisel back. Good. That old man is coming, and now he can fix me up and put me back where I belong. Goodness.
Chisel was very hurt because of the way pot number 2 had spoken to him. And pot number 9 was shocked that anyone would talk that way at all. They both sat up straighter as they heard the door open and Jamal and his father walked into the room. "Oh, Father, what color did you say you needed?" Jamal walked over to the paint shelf to await his father's instructions. I'm not sure I have that color anymore, son. Plus, this jar has so many lumps in it, it's not really worth saving. If I had not already put paint on it, perhaps I could have broken it and started over, but it has too many problems right now, and I need something I can use right now. Get a new jar off the shelf, and we will just throw this one away. So Jamal took pot number 2 and tossed her into the trash. There she shattered into small pieces. He then went to the shelf and picked up pot number 9. "You seem to have a lot of gold paint here, Father. Shall I get this one for you?" Jamal asked his father. "Oh, no, son. I'm saving that one for something special. Just gather the green one over there. And let's hurry and finish this pot." So Jamal grabbed the paint he needed, and then he picked up pot number 9 and left the room. His father followed a few minutes later. Chisel and Little Pot. As soon as the door closed behind them, Little Pot yelled to the trash,
Pot number 2! Pot number 2!
"Shh, Little Pot. Pot number 2 can no longer hear you."
What?
Chisel tried to explain as best as he could to Little Pot.
Why? I don't understand.
Because she is now broken. She was unusable. She had too many flaws that could not be fixed.
Oh,
Little Pot was very sad, so
why
he
is
said,
this happening? I think I'll rest now.
So pot number 10 rested all that day. The next day came and went. Then the next week, and so on and so on. Soon time seemed to go on and still pot number 10 stayed on the shelf.
Oh, Chisel, am I unusable? Master still hasn't come back to use me, and I want to be used so badly. Why has he forgotten me?
Little Pot began to cry. Little Pot, Master hasn't forgotten you.
To use me.
You will get your turn. When it's your time, though. It's just not your turn right now.
Well, he comes in here all the time, but he never uses me. He came in here a week ago with a big new lump. He made 5 new clay jars. He took them out of here to the big fire stove, and he burned them till they shined. He and his son then painted them all very beautiful, like they did the first of my brothers and sisters, and yet still here I sit. It's not fair. He passed me up the first time, and now he has passed me up again. I don't think he plans to ever use me.
Little Pot cried. He will use you when it's your time. Be patient and wait. Chisel tried to encourage Little Pot very hard. So Little Pot waited and waited, day after day, as Master came in and made new pots and took them out and used them. Little Pot even placed himself on the table on which he was made so that when Master came in, he would see him. but Master just picked him up and put him back on the shelf.
Master's never
Little Pot
gonna
decided
use
he could not bear it
I
anymore.
don't want to be
He could not
here
bear to be
anymore.
forgotten and figured there was
He
no
doesn't want
purpose for
me.
him. So he knocked himself over onto his side and began to roll. As he neared the edge, Chisel looked up and shouted to him, "Stop, Little Pot! You'll fall and break yourself."
I know. I know.
Little Pot said sadly, and then he rolled off the edge of the counter onto the floor, where he broke into 7 different pieces. "What have you done?" cried Chisel. With tears in his eyes, he straightened up because he heard footsteps outside the door. "Oh, Father, look! That little jar has fallen off and broken. Shall I pick it up and throw it away for you?" No, son. I was gonna break that pot myself. I made it a little smaller than the others. I needed to break it so that I could add more clay to it and remold it. It is a special little pot to me. It was the first pot out of the lump. I have very special plans for it." So Jamal's father picked up Little Clay Pot and placed him on table. He then got a little hammer and broke the pot into smaller pieces. He added water, and then he added more clay. He then picked up the mixture and started to knead and roll and squash and stretch and pull. Jamal's father then rolled the clay into a ball and wet it again. He placed the clay on the spinning wheel. As the wheel began to spin, Jamal's father stuck his finger into the top of the clay, causing a big hole to appear. He also used his other hand to keep it steady. Longer and longer, the neck of the clay became until it looked like a long vase. Jamal's father lovingly used chisel to etch in designs. When he was finished, he took the clay vase from off of the wheel and placed it on table. "Well, son, I guess we will leave the clay jar here to dry overnight, and in the morning we will put it in the fire and then paint it. I need to have it ready for tomorrow night." "As you say, Father. You know what? I have never in all my life seen you use such care as you did on that little clay pot today." Jamal's father said, "That's not true, son. I use that kind of care with all of my vessels. It's just that I saved the best for last." He smiled at his son, and it took a little bit more detail. Then after he had cleaned his hands, he draped his arms around his son's shoulders, and out the room they went. His purpose. Chisel was nervous as he hopped around tables so that he could see Little Pot. He had to climb up on chair and then slide closer to table so that he could see for himself. There he could see Little Pot's face clearly. He crept closer and cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Little Pot? Can you hear me? Little Pot, I know you can hear me, and I know you're still there. So say something, please." Little Pot opened one eye and looked around. He then opened the other eye and looked around. When he saw Chisel, he gave him a small, shy smile. And then when Chisel smiled back, Little Pot's smile became brilliant.
Chisel, it's really you. And look, it's really me. Yay!
"Of course it's you. What did you think?" Chisel
know.
asked.
Well, I did not expect this. Look at how tall I am. I thought when I rolled off the shelf that would be the end of me.
You're still you.
I even felt myself breaking before I passed out. But look at me. Why didn't Master fix me up? He could have used another pot. I thought he would. Yay! I thought I was gone forever. Remember when pot number 2 was broken? She never came back. But I did. Why?
Well, you came back because you had a purpose. You were made for a specific reason, and nothing could take your place. Master made you for whatever it was he called you for. It's okay that you were broken. He was gonna break you anyway, so that you could be taller. So he had to break you, then remold you, and now you're going out to the fire. And then you'll know what you were called for. Be of good cheer, little pot. I know that you wanted to destroy yourself like pot number 2. You see, the difference between you and pot number 2 is she had too much mess and so many lumps that she was unwilling to get rid of. So when she was broken, she was still unusable because she was just too full of herself. And in the long run, it led to her destruction. You didn't have any of that excess paint or mess. So Master was able to break you completely and to rebuild you. Isn't it wonderful?
Yay!
Chisel asked.
Yes, it was and is indeed.
Little Pot smiled. He then went to sleep because he knew he had a long day in front of him. Early the next morning, Jamal and his father returned for Little Pot. Jamal went and picked up the special gold paint his father had told him to get. And then they went outside to the big brick oven. Little Pot was placed into the fire and turned and taken out again, and then he was placed back in there and turned again. He felt so awful in the fire. It wasn't a good place at all.
I don't like
He
this.
was then left to rest for a little while. And then Master came back and began to paint him all gold. He also took out other paints and began to decorate him, and he felt warm inside. Little Pot was left to dry in the sun for the rest of the day. That night, a young man who was not Master came and picked him up. Little Pot was very afraid because he didn't know what was going to happen to him. He thought Master would come back and get him, but he hadn't.
Oh, Master.
Little Pot could see that he
Where
was
are
being
you?
carried into the big castle again, and that he was going down a long hallway with doors on every side. They walked for what seemed like a long time, till they came to a door at the end of the hall. On the other side of the door, Little Pot could hear many voices raised in joyful conversation. The young man holding Little Pot opened the door and walked through. The lights were burning and the music was playing beautifully. As Little Pot was being carried into the room, people would stop to gaze at him and say wonderful things. They passed into another room, and Little Pot looked up and saw all of the other Little Pots who were made with him and the ones who were made after him lined up on shelves against 2 walls. There were 10 vases on each shelf. Little Pot smiled because he was so happy. All of the other Little Pots were decorated beautifully, and they smiled in wonder as they saw him. He saw the other Little Pots stand up just a little bit straighter as the man who was carrying him placed him on a table in the center. The people came into the room to look at him and to admire him, and he was so happy. He never expected anything like this to ever happen to him. That is why he had thrown himself off the shelf that day. A few minutes later, there were the sound of trumpets, and a man came forward to announce,
Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you His Majesty, King Obadiah, and his son, Prince Jamal.
Little Pot waited anxiously like everyone else for the king to arrive. He had never seen a king, and he felt so fortunate that he was going to see one now. The king made his way through the crowd, shaking hands or nodding his head in acknowledgement. He made his way straight toward Little Pot and picked him up and turned around with him in his hands to face the crowd. He then said,
I want you all to see this treasure here. I made it myself, and it means everything to me. And guess what? I saved it for the last. You have all been able to enjoy my other creations throughout this past couple of weeks and months, but I would like to introduce you to my finest work of all. I call it my Manar.
Little Pot was shocked. All of this was for him? Master was really the king, and he had made him? He had saved him for the last because he wanted him to be the best? Little Pot was so happy. He looked around at his brothers and sisters who smiled back at him proudly. From the fireplace, Chisel smiled at Little Pot and said,
I told you, Little Pot, Master uses everyone, even me.
Wow! Isn't that amazing? Of course it's amazing. Remember, Yahuwah uses all of us, and although it doesn't feel like He's using you right now, He is. He has to remold you and sometimes break you in order to remold you, and then He has to mush you and squash you, and sometimes you have to go through the fires in order to learn life's lessons. And remember in Jeremiah 29:11 where it says, For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says Yahuwah, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. He's coming for you, brothers and sisters. Just wait on Him. Wow. All right. Thank you so much for joining in. And I really hope you enjoyed this story. I want to give all honor and glory to the Most High Yahuwah, Bahashem Yahashua. And I want to thank Him because it is true, the little clay pot is me and is you. We just need to remember that Yah loves us and He has not forgotten us. So I say Toda Rabah to the Most High Yah for all things. And I say to my brethren, Toda, Toda.